Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Dynamics Fortnite Fridays.
Where we cover everything Dynamics, great and small. Welcome to unofficial summer, Bart. So
I know, we're getting
Memorial
close.
Days, yep, it's getting there. It's getting warm, and Canadian wildfire smoke's coming down. So it's like I know it's summer.
You can get all your white and yellow pants back out, Dan.
So I can guarantee everybody on the show, I own zero pair of white pants and zero pair of yellow pants, which begs the question: how many pair do you own, Bart?
Unfortunately, I've got the same counts you do on those, so
Okay,
yeah, we're not very fun.
well, okay, maybe that's a better dad joke than our dad jokes that we had today. But what do you got for me today, Bart?
Yeah, I agreed. I went with a really old school one. So, did you know that early in his days, Chewbacca crashed an X-Wing fighter?
No, tell me more, Bart.
It was a Wookiee mistake.
Okay. Next year on May 4th, you got to tell that one, right?
Oh, of course,
So
right?
yeah, of course, yeah. All right.
All right, so you're
Let's
pulling
see.
from the deck again.
I'm pulling from the deck again. Have not seen this joke yet. Okay, this one's not bad.
Okay.
When does a joke become a dad joke?
When you tell it.
Um, any joke becomes a bad joke. That's a bad joke, not a dad joke. No, when it becomes apparent.
When it becomes apparent.
It's apparent. Okay.
There we go.
All right.
There we go.
Once again, our content's going to be way, way better than our jokes. So what do you got for me, Bart?
All right. I think screen sharing just kicked in. So let's start with a bunch of stuff from Build. So there's lots of blog posts and other things related to announcements here. And this show is going to be a little more advertising than operationally, unfortunately, because of all of those announcements. But it's still great stuff to be preparing for in your organization. So I'm going to go ahead and review it. And I'm going to do a skim. A lot of stuff is out that I'm going to let you read, but Power Apps is the first thing. So the plan capability that's been around for quite a while, they're kind of renaming it a little bit even right now, but that is out there. It's generally available. It's been improved even a little bit in some places. So make sure and take advantage of that. The interesting thing, I think, in this agentic capability is that within the context of Power Apps, we can now be layering in multiple agents to be doing work from within that app context, and the users have a UI to be able to go do things in there. So there's agentic actions, you can get real-time guidance, automate work, there's all kinds of things that you can be doing inside of those. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but when we get a little further into some of these other articles. And in model-driven apps, as you add agents to those model-driven apps to do things, they will just show up in the agent feed that I'll be showing you a picture of in just a little bit. And so that's, I think, one of the coolest things in the app world is how to start coordinating all the agents and helping them when the agents get stuck and need help right within that user context. And around Power Apps, we also started talking a lot about some of the enterprise grade management capabilities that we've got out there and managed availability and managed security and managed governance and managed operations. We got all those management things. So those are continuing to have investment, especially on the governance side. And we'll talk a little bit more and the security side. So we got a few different things. Last thing that's super cool in the Power Apps world that I think is, it blew my mind, is that we're now allowing you to use the Power Platform as the hosting environment and to use the connector infrastructure and the authentication schemes and things like that that the Power Platform brings that are super helpful for app developers, but to let the app developers actually build their apps in code. So in Cursor or in Visual Studio Code, they are building a React app or whatever, and they can publish it to the Power Platform to run and use the connectors and all that kind of stuff. And that just blew my mind that we're really going down deep in this Fusion development world. So that was kind of the Power Apps quick and dirty update scheme. Here's kind of the overarching announcement that came out from Jared Spataro on what all's gone on with things that are related to some of the Power Platform stuff, especially Copilot Studio. But Copilot tuning is a big deal to be able to go in and take the M365 Copilot experience and what it has for capabilities and to be able to tune it and give it examples of what good is in certain scenarios, like creating proposals and things like that, right from within the major Copilot itself interface without having to go into a specific agent in order to do that. And to be able to use that special model that you've tuned up and do other things with that in Copilot Studio and other places at that point. So Copilot tuning is certainly worth paying attention to. So being able to bring your own model in Copilot Studio, we will get to, of course, that we now have opened up the ability to use not just a few select models, which was kind of the first iteration of this in private preview, but we've now opened it up to anything you can do in AI Foundry. If you publish a model in AI Foundry, then you could use that in Copilot Studio. Multi-agent orchestration is another major thing to allow you to build more specialized, bespoke agents that have a task that they know how to do really well, and to be able to orchestrate among those to have the parent orchestrator and special task oriented agents that it knows how to call in the right context based on what's going on in the work process or the conversation, depending on whether it's autonomous or conversational, is huge in terms of building enterprise grade assets that you can manage as more of microservices and do things with. We also, from a security standpoint, introduced this concept of the intra-agent ID in the intra system. So agents will get their own identifier, just like app registrations would, or for service principals, or like users get or groups get. That those things are all intra objects that the security folks can make sure they have the right permissions and can turn off and all those kind of things. Well, agents now get those as well to be able to keep track from a security standpoint of what each agent is supposed to be able to do. And the Purview information protection is going to start applying to the Dataverse data that is part of Copilot Studio, and it will protect that information accordingly. So big update to be able to use Purview in that operational way on the Dataverse data for what's showing up in these agents. Other Copilot Studio things, computer use tool we will talk about, model context protocol we'll talk about, agent flows are out there, deep reasoning models, there's just all kinds of really cool stuff. And most of the rest of this is more on the pro code side of doing things within the M365 Teams space for agentic work, other than these M365 Copilot APIs are going to be super cool to be able to use sort of that semantic index at an API level to be able to not just look at the data, but actually kind of emulate some things that M365 Copilot has to do in its UI to be able to bring some of those capabilities at an API layer to be able to use in your custom Copilots, I guess is the best way to think about it. So all that goodness of M365 Copilot, if you've licensed appropriately, can be used in Copilot Studio capabilities using these M365 Copilot APIs. So this is a little picture of that agent feed I talked about a minute ago, that in your model-driven app, if you have more than one agent that's being used to do some work process as part of what this overall application does, that you can have this orchestration and understand which agents are there, and you can add new agents to it if you need to, but then you can figure out based on what these agents are doing, what things have been completed, which ones were done by the user, which ones are done by the agent, what are some suggestions it might make, where are the places that the agent is stuck that a human needs to go, unstick it with whatever it's getting stuck on, whether it's a problem with the way it's configured or a problem with data, or it just doesn't know how to do it because it hasn't been told how to handle this situation, that all those things would just show up in the needs assistance area that users would then help it with. So pretty cool what's coming together there. And I guess the last thing is we have integrated the Viva stack with Copilot Studio to be able to actually look at what your Copilot Studio agents are doing and put some measures against it to actually calculate your return on investment with some of those agents. So lots and lots of amazing capabilities coming out. So I introduced this agent ID. If you want a deeper dive on all the stuff that you can do with the Agent ID and how it kind of works. And this is not just with Copilot Studio, but it is here for all kinds of agents, whether they were built in Foundry or whether they're built in custom code with using something like semantic kernel or whatever else, that all of those agents should all show up. And agent builder ones and SharePoint ones, I think they'll all end up with their own identifier. So if you are a security person and wants to look through all the things that are going on with Entra Agent ID, this is a great post to look at the details of. All right, I talked about a lot of these things already. I'm going to kind of be repeating myself as I scroll through them, but this one is a blog post all centered around what is going on with Copilot Studio specifically. I've already talked a little bit about that multiple agent orchestration, so I'm not going to talk more about that. Computer use, I think I mentioned, but it's essentially, and I think I may have even talked about this on a previous show, the ability to do similar things to what an RPA tool would do, like Power Automate Desktop, and control a computer. But instead of having to give it very defined kind of commands that are definitively running as code in order to execute that and requiring screen scrapes and everything else to make it come to life the way RPA tools that are fairly fragile and very, very user interface specific that knows the XY coordinates of everything on a screen. These computer use agents basically are intelligent agents that kind of understand what UI looks like for computer screens, and you just can tell it using English commands the way you do in other sort of AI worlds, what you would like it to be able to do, and it can figure out how to key the right data in the right fields and how to hit the right buttons to delete or to execute new or edit or whatever else that you might need to do. So this Copilot Studio computer use agents is going to be super cool. Talked a little bit about bringing your own model. The MCP servers, I believe we've talked about in the past. They're kind of the new modern industry standard protocol for being able to connect your agents up to data sources. That's really what those are all about. So the MCP is about connecting your agents to the data. And on the multi-agent orchestration, the new standard in making that work across all sorts of agents, across all the clouds and all the providers are making them, is called agent-to-agent protocol that'll be used for all that multi-agent handoff between agents. So A to A is on making one agent talk to another agent. MCP is about connecting a specific agent up to data that it will interact with as it operates. Developer tools. So we talked a little bit about those M365 Copilot APIs. I don't think I need to talk any more about that. A big thing that is announced, but I haven't seen show up in any of my tenants yet, is being able to take a Copilot Studio agent and hit one button to publish to SharePoint and have that show up within a SharePoint site with kind of a, not just put it in an iframe, but a specific way to make an agent show up. So I'm excited to see what that looks like once I finally have that land in my tenant. There's some really good stuff also coming out around the knowledge area, specifically in Copilot Studio, and some of the things that we have done to make it a richer experience. So we've now got different ways to work with files. We can set up a syncing algorithm with either a folder on your computer, a OneDrive set of files that you specifically choose, or a folder, or SharePoint files that you specifically select, or a folder, and it will actually then have a syncing algorithm take wherever those files are living now in one of those file repositories and sync them into your agent and watch for updates to be done to one of those files or new things to be added to a folder, depending on how you've defined it, and have that automatically link those things up into the agent itself too. And when the files land in the agent, it's just like you would actually put the files on the agent, where it does the full-blown vectorization of the chunking of the documents and everything else that you put in there. And it can look at really large files and both images and text that are part of those things that you upload, and do a much richer job of parsing them to make sure that your knowledge repository for doing the RAG is as robust as it can be. You can still also just connect things up with the connector infrastructure, and we can do that either through these Copilot connectors, which is the rename of Graph connectors, if you knew what graph connectors were, which would then show up anywhere in the M365 Copilot and M365 search and things like that. But you can now do really bespoke things with those in the knowledge area of Copilot Studio also. And you can use connectors to not only just go look at the data and take action on it or whatever else, but you can use connectors in the knowledge area to build onto the index, just like the data was sitting in Dataverse, where it gets indexed, and have ways to just search the index and have a pointer then back to the real data that it's referring to once somebody's gone farther in. But lots of interesting stuff that's going on in that knowledge area. In the settings, in the new Copilot Studio preview interface, you're also going to get the ability to choose your model. So it's going to default to GPT-4o, but you'll be able to choose 4.1 and then add in any of those other things from the other areas of Foundry. And then you can give it better instructions on how you would like this particular agent to respond. Always bold proper nouns, or always bold something that's coming from a knowledge repository or its title, or make sure that if you've got a list of items, you always use bullet points, or you can just give it interesting instructions for how to always respond because it's doing a certain type of task, where you want to just give it some additional help in formatting things the way the users would want to see it. Turn on code interpreters and giving it different ways to respond to users if the content moderation kicks in, so that they know it was content moderation that stopped something from going on. Lots of great stuff. All right. Code interpreter allows it to do math and other things as part of what the agent does. It actually runs Python and generates some interesting things. And we have a VS Code extension for Copilot Studio now, for those of you who are a little bit more on the pro code side, to be able to actually look at all of this stuff in the code first, YAML and all the other things, and be able to edit it in an IDE and publish those changes back up. So lots of pretty cool stuff. Embedded Agent Builder does have a lot of nice enhancements as well. So if you're interested in those, I'm just going to let you read through them. We're going long enough the way things are. Dataverse had quite a few specific things that have been pulled in to try to make sure that in the data side of what all these agents need to really work well, that it has some nice enhancements. So inside of Dataverse, when you define a new column, soon, you'll be able to actually say this column is going to be defined by a prompt, and it can refer to other data in that same table and other columns, or wherever else you need it to actually bring data from that's part of that prompt. And then it will generate the appropriate data to be stored in that column, in that table, based on whatever your prompt said it should be. So that's going to be a pretty cool thing, to be able to do the AI as data is being saved and have it just be stored and ready to be used. We're going to have some interesting ways to have agents access the data and the way it stores things in Dataverse, to be able to interact with both the humans and the agents in the way they're orchestrated, to make some of these agentic capabilities, especially in the autonomous world, be able to handle all the different types of data they need, all coming from Dataverse, so that it can be one data repository that powers all of those experiences. Dataverse is also getting its own MCP server that will be a SaaS-based server that will just show up in your environment. You'll be able to connect to it to just use Dataverse, and we'll have a little bit more conversation around that as we get a little further into some of these other articles where they've got some specific things on it. We've got knowledge that's generally available. Real-time data warehousing with the link to Fabric capabilities, and then being able to use agents from that data that's combined with other data out in Fabric to be able to come back into Copilot Studio and use those as sources for other agent orchestration. So all sorts of fun stuff coming together with the way all of that data will work. And Dynamics data is going to be exposable very, very soon directly in M365 Copilot without having to build your own bespoke agent. It'll be kind of a checkbox item, and you'll be able to specify which environment is supposed to surface the data from, and it will just show up in the M365 Copilot queries, just like any other data that would be sitting in SharePoint or any other things would be. So lots of pretty cool stuff. A little bit more about file upload versus just indexing metadata versus just doing read operations is here, and there's a whole session on it from Build that is worth looking at. Power Platform Connector Software Development Kit to be able to do more things in your connectors to just make sure that they're agentic ready is out there as well. All sorts of fun stuff. Centralizing where tools show up. I think we've talked about all of these things already. I did learn that in the prompt area, sometime between now and this fall, we should start seeing the ability to have static files be part of a prompt that would just always be there to run the RAG pattern within the prompt itself. And I know that there are quite a few scenarios that I have bumped up against where that would be really handy instead of having to go find and deposit a file into the prompt each time you run it. So lots of great stuff. There's also now a few pre-built autonomous agents, the document processing agent, the customer brief agent, the lead manager agent, to be able to just be an agentic self-service agent that's autonomous that can go out and do things on behalf of humans just by instantiating them. They'll be in the template gallery, so feel free to configure some of those in some of your test environments and see how well they work. All right, Power Pages got all kinds of other improvements as part of this, and I'm only going to highlight a couple of things. One is, though, we have built a specific security algorithm that not only uses Sentinel to watch all the things that are going on, which that's been possible, but maybe this has been enhanced in the Sentinel just detection monitoring capability that's on top of a Power Page, but to have a specific agent that is running under the covers that is analyzing that data and actually sending recommendations out to both Outlook and Teams of what humans should be doing, and also taking some action itself to try to prevent attacks from getting out of hand. It's pretty impressive. From a user experience perspective, there are a few new things that have been brought, especially in how we will be able to surface agents and orchestrate them. Vibe coding on Power Pages is now a thing because there's a VS Code capability that will let you vibe code and also preview the page without leaving VS Code. You don't have to like publish it and then go look in the browser to be able to look at that. And all kinds of new things with with Power Pages governance showing up in the PPAC in the Power Pages area is also now here. So lots of cool capabilities that are all showing up in Power Pages. Pre-built MCP servers. I mentioned this just a little bit ago. So I talked about the Dataverse version of it. So in the Dataverse version, it just enables you to interact with whatever you have stored in Dataverse. But we've also built specific Dynamics 365 versions. We've got a sales version that understands sales context and knows what all the sales entities are with leads and opportunities and accounts and contacts and activities and all that kind of stuff, and understanding kind of what sales nomenclature and lingo is in order to help sellers do more with just connecting to that sales app. And same thing on the service side. And we've got things that are there for supply chain and for finance on the ERP side with kind of the F&O stack. And we've got Business Central ones coming very soon as well. So lots of pretty cool stuff with connecting our Copilot Studio or other agentic capabilities in the Microsoft stack with these pre-built MCP servers that already understand a lot of the data that is sitting out there in those platforms. So I'm really excited about those. In Copilot Studio, another new feature that is being rolled out in private preview right now, but to be able to do self-testing and agent evaluation and agent improvement and be able to have these test scripts that will run through things and give you scores, all that kind of stuff, and all the analytics on it, and not just during the tests, but even enriched analytics for what's going on with the real use of your agents that are in production, along with user feedback for them giving thumbs up, thumbs down, for whether the things that they have seen be surfaced by the agent were helpful or not. All that stuff is there, along with the billing analysis. So lots of pretty cool stuff in the Copilot Studio world for evaluation and the analytics of what's going on. Not only do we have that there for agents, but prompts as little widgets of functionality that can be reusable not just in an agent, but in Power Automate or in an app, can also now be batch tested. So there is a way to have prompts have run through a batch and get a score and all that kind of stuff. So giving it what your criteria is and your test data set and all that kind of stuff is all out there. So I just pointed you at the article to walk you through how to do it, but really important to know we've got really nice kind of ALM-centric ways to stress test and make changes and see what happened without having to do a human in the loop every time other than analyze the results and make changes. If you are using agents in your contact center environments, this is pretty important to know that we are now allowing you to train up a specific natural language understanding model for your industry, your business, to train what your terms are, what customers would typically refer to things as, and actually replace the Copilot Studio native natural language understanding unit with a specific one of yours. And so this showed up in the Admin Center's portal of, wow, the Message Center, that's what it's called. So I wanted to call that out and make sure people know that that's possible if you are running a contact center, and that would help. A couple other things from the Message Center. So both Project for Web and To Do are going to get merged in with the functionality of Planner. So all three of those tools will just be called Planner, and you'll have the functionality of all three of those tools inside of Planner to be able to do things all the way from simple task management all the way to really robust multi-month project management, all from a single tool set that will be a little more streamlined that way. Advisor, one of the tools in Power Platform Admin Center, is getting a bunch of enhancements with things that it will give you advice on. So I'll let you click into this if you want to see that. And then I also put a link here that I talked earlier about those graph connectors for enterprise search being renamed Copilot connectors and being used in Copilot Studio in lots of creative ways from the knowledge standpoint. So thought I would just put a link to a little bit more research, and not research, a little bit more information about how all that stuff works and how to configure it when it's going to get lit up in all of your tenants. So that finally, I believe, rounds out my group of enhancements that I was calling out this week, Dan. So over to you.
You know, busy 2 weeks, a busy fortnight. So lots and lots of updates, like lots of good updates, Bart.
Build throws lots of stuff at us.
It does. It does. Not so much in the D365 finance and supply chain world, because it's like that's more of the dev side than the application side. But so I just have some interesting updates. I was talking a little bit about HR with the recruiting app. I've talked about that before, but it's like there's some really good documentation how to set up that you need to like review a few things there. A new interface for HR and of course supply chain. I'll talk about what's new in supply chain. Did some agent management stuff. So, well, there's only 5 line items. It's like hopefully I'll take less than a half an hour, but we'll see. So, first of all, setting up this HR recruiting app, right? This is new, and I've talked over like the last few years. It's like, okay, we went off and we did our HR, our human resources, human capital management on our own. Set up a standalone system. It was on its own. We pulled it back in. We had a recruiting app. We had like interview, like application app, and then we divested that after we did the acquisition of LinkedIn, and then we brought it back into 365 finance and supply chain, and basically stabilize it. Now we're adding a lot more things to that. So it's like now we're starting to really move quickly with HR. So with that background. This HR app is really quite nice. First of all, for traditional admins for finance and supply chain, we're moving into a Power Platform Dataverse world, right? So there's a lot more things. So just be aware as you set up some of these new features, you actually have to, okay, what version you have to set this up, what's the licensing you have to set up right, you have the system administrator, but you also have to set up, make sure that Dataverse is set up, right? They're going to see this a lot more features as we go through, either connected to your Dataverse if you have existing, or there's an explanation how to set that up, right? And then we go into Power Platform Admin Center to get that set up. Make sure you got the resources, go into the resources, set up that up on your environment, and make sure you have that your virtual entities set up, right? And the flow set up under that. So a couple things there. So then you get started. What do we need to do, right? You have to install. There's some details on that. I'm not going to go through too much too much detail on that, right? But then you have to onboard users, right? So it's like you have to sync the users from Entra ID, not unlike what you do in traditional finance and supply chain. So it's like make sure they have Entra ID IDs and then sync those up. And then configuration. So the configuration, you want to set up your emails, right? Your templates, email users, logos. Who's the users in that? Not only the admin users, but what's the roles within that? And then the hiring template. What's the standard hiring templates we're going to use? So you might have a different template for an entry-level employee versus an executive, for instance, right? So we want to go through those different components. We go through some details on how to set that up step by step. So this is relatively new for this environment, other than details, and the documentation is new. So make sure you go through that as you set it up. Then you need to configure the career site, right? So you have to have a site name where people can go to. You can configure the external identity providers, it's like how people get into it and go through the security, and then enable email accounts and be able to send notifications when people upload or apply for things. But using this app, right? So first of all, you have a dashboard. You have a dashboard to look at the status of each of the different jobs or applicants that you have on that, upcoming interviews that you may have, the pending approvals that you have to go through, whether it be a job approval or interview approval, so on and so forth. And then a list of any ready to hire candidates that you may have on that as well. So that's the first use, right? And then you need to set up the job ad. So you have roles and then you have jobs, right? Jobs are for that individual job for that person that you have there. And so you set up the job, you create the ad, all the details that you need for that, skills, put the recruiting requests, set the status up, and then you add the hiring team. So it's like, who's got to review this? Is it the manager? Is it like, other people they actually bring into a team? Do you actually have like a V team that goes through and recruits it? Who's the recruiter on that? All of those different components, along with the recruiting manager and the hiring manager, right? Who's interviewing? So I often get invites. It's like, okay, I want you to interview these selections candidates. Here's the data. Looks at my calendar, and there's a template of things that we need to go through at Microsoft, right? So also any of the screening questions that you have, are they skilled at Power Platform? Are they skilled at, D365? Do they know the Dataverse? Something that, we're looking for here at Microsoft, right? And then there's an approval for that ad on that. So go through that, and then we can actually use the careers on the site. So this is where you apply for the jobs, right, for that. And then you can set up like prospects in the HR recruiting app, right? You can turn the applications and invite them to apply. So somebody might be interested in this, trigger something to actually send an application for them to actually apply formally for a position or a job on that. Then you need to set up the panels, right? Like who's going to be part of that application, who's going to be going through it. So it goes through step by step by that. And then scheduling the interviews. It looks at the Outlook availability from the panel members on that we set up earlier to actually help you schedule those, those applicants or to the panel members as you go through. Then we end up booking the slots. and then go through that whole process. Also, there's something nice in here, so you can bulk upload resumes. So this is an AI that actually reads the the resumes and make sure that matches and looks to see if these are a good fit for this position or not. That's written on that using AI from a group of applicants on that. So, that's just kind of a quick and dirty view of what we have. But again, we're doing a whole lot more work within the human resources world, and I thought this is a very nice little tool, very easy to use. That's on the Dataverse. The next thing is this immersive home for HR, and this is the same for finance and supply chain. They're documented in two different areas, so it's applicable to each one of those. But I just wanted it actually listed twice because some people will be looking at HR when they search the notes and they look at things. Some people look into finance and supply chain, but just the same. So this immersive home. So traditionally, Microsoft and Dynamics, especially in the finance and supply chain world, has been really trying to surface the job up to people. So if you look at workspaces, it's like, okay, you have the tiles and it says it's like I have 5 people that are on credit hold or something like that, right? But really that's kind of a filter. And so it's a filter and it's by exception. So it really isn't intelligent, but it's really nice to know what you do the job. It surfaces what I need to know by exception. Well, this is just is a whole lot more proactive, right? So first of all, we have a fluent design patterns. It's like it's going to be fluent, it's going to change, and be malleable to what experience you have. So you have an adaptive experience. It's going to modernize the experience, make it easier, less clutter, and move away from the static forms that we had before. Even though we had the tiles, but it's like those are just counts on that. To actually bringing more dynamic information that's more relevant to work with you, right? And so the agents, let's see, the agents themselves, right, have an activity overview, and they, basically have a rank view from the workspaces on there. So based upon what the criteria is, what the AI is telling you, the Copilot's saying to you, it's ranking your work just like it does with Outlook, right? And it kind of ranks the things that you should be doing each day, right? There's a greeting summary of how you go through there. There is a suggestion area on that that presents the most relevant callouts to each user, and provide additional instructions to make it more beneficial. There's a work area on that hosts a list of the priority ranked on these activities, or the activity cards on that. And each card reflects a step in the action of the process that needs to be completed, right? Or a task that needs to be completed. You can have multiple similar work items that can be collapsed into one activity card and work on several things at the same time if they're very similar, maybe from the same vendor that you actually have some problems with some items that need to be brought in. And in most cases, you can actually complete the actions without navigating away. So if you just have to check on those. And there's also a link from the workspace to that related task or workspace, right? And then there's in that activity area, it presents the metrics. And it's a space where you can get more detail and drill down into it, right? Into those. So that's the immersive home for HR. It's going to be the same for supply chain, but this is going to change the way that we actually interface. Instead of doing homepage and workspaces on this, you're going to see a lot more of this, and we're changing the way that we're working with agentic behavior within these systems. So again, you're going to see a lot more, and I'm going to talk a lot more about this over the upcoming episodes in the future. Now, let's talk about what's happening in supply chain. I know that was covered a little bit last week, but this is really a nice view with some nice detail on that. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this today, but there's some agents around procurement. So it's automate procure to pay, tasks with supplier communications. I talked about this in preview. Now it's the release in 10.0.44, right? So there's also a column on here that this wasn't here before. But how do we enable this, right? So it's like you have to enable the feature management immersive. You have to do the ready agent. You need the supplier communications. You need to send. All of these different things are enabled by how do you actually use those. So this is something new that I wanted to point out, just in case you didn't see this on your own. Another thing is there is production control and accounts receivable. Under this one's, you need achieve regulatory compliance and quality excellence, right? So first, yeah, this one is kind of nice because it's like it kind of goes through. Okay, the key features, and then how to activate this. But you have to make sure it's enabled. But it helps you optimize testing strategies. There's some flex sampling. There's skip lot testing for all you manufacturing people out there. You know what that is. There's quality order creation triggers on this. There's sample management, instrument calibration. There's COAs, or certificate of analysis, and enhancements in electronic signatures that we didn't have the depth before. And there's digitized manufacturing for precision and compliance. What this means is you can get those like electronic batch records from production dispensing. For instance, if you're working in the pharma world, you 100% need to do that. Also, continuous improvement with CAPA, which is corrective action, preventative actions to prevent that from happening again. And then the user experience is just a whole lot easier. So some big work that's been done on that. And then also on production control. And on production control, I really like this one because it allows the users themselves to actually change the color or change the user interface instead of this kind of the bland blue, dark, dark night color. It changes that. But down below, I'm going to talk a few things that we've done with enhancements on the shop floor control. First of all, in the asset management, this one is on asset management. You can do work orders, right? So it's like you can do a break fix or a preventive maintenance and things like that. And there are a list of a bill of material or a forecast, if you will, which is the requirements for that we may need to do a break fix or the PM movements on it. What we can do now is we can actually comprehensive view of the potential shortages and aggregates that material across those different work orders, along with other material needs that you may have elsewhere on that. So that's really nice. Also on asset management, we can do work orders, but we previously couldn't do with our internal within finance and supply chain service. We couldn't actually bill on that. Now we actually we'll be able to bill from work orders. So if it is a customer owned asset that we're managing, think of it as similar to field service, but it's not within the field service app, but same type of functionality, but that's an enterprise asset app. So if you have additional labor that or materials that needs to be actually put on this, and you actually have like a forecast top of what it might be, it's like, so maybe the let me know after anything's over $1,000 and it exceeds that, or is supposed to exceed that, you can actually send out a warning and then maybe just kick off a workflow to get approval from that from the customer that's over. Under cost management, so this one is just basically it's large volume historical value. That it got so large in some of our very large customers that it timed out. So we kind of break that out a little bit. Under master planning, these are a couple small but important things into this. This allows pegging against shelf life batches for planned optimization. So you might have a batch that expires in July, a batch that expires in August, and a batch that expires in September. But we're making it in June, and it's like, that's just fine. We'll mix it in. Before it pegged against each one of those, now we can actually aggregate to see if all of those batches meet in, which simplifies the planning and making sure that you are actually utilizing the inventory that you have available to you. So that's different. Also, we're considering batch disposition code, whether that's available or not in ATP. So available to promise is on the sales order side. For available to promise was also on the other side. So that's a nice feature on that. Also, we're allowing some more granular planning within a single site or different warehouse, because you may have a scheduling agent for one particular plant or warehouse that utilizes it in a different fashion or manner, and to have different planning criteria. So now we're able to have that granularity on that. On procurement and pricing, this just copies over from a requisition. The tax information across on it. And then foreign trade, I'm not going to spend any time on that. This one is really nice in production control, and this is shop floor control. The first version that we had on this, when we allowed the consumption material within the shop floor control, while it worked, it was really kludgy. For me, it really wasn't intuitive. And there's a lot of steps in. If I did one wrong, it wouldn't work the way that I wanted it to, and I'd have to go back and retry again. This one just makes it a whole lot easier. So so this way we can add lines, adjust and delete material lines, and adjust the adjust that within that interface. So it just makes it a whole lot easier. Also in production control, I found it very difficult to work with serialized and batched items within the first interface of the material integration of the shop floor control. Now that's just working just fine. So we also did that under the warehouse management as well. Same with reporting scrap, just made that a whole lot easier. And the last thing we have on warehouse management is the deletion of transfer. When a transfer order is, we're going to delete that ASN, just kind of free up that space there. So quite a bit and some nice features within the supply chain in 10.0.44. I want to get a little more detail into that. Of those. I'm not going to spend any time on the immersive home for finance and supply chain. Again, it's the same as the HR. But there is a nice article on agent management that I just wanted to spend a little bit of time on. I know we're running a little bit late, but I think this is important because our world's changing. It's just not regular standard process flows. Everything's got agentic behavior. Everything's gotten co-pilots, and everything will begin into that. It's just like, so the sooner you learn this, and the sooner you understand how we manage it, I think the better off we are. I know that we've been talking a lot about it on the Power App side, but if you're an admin for finance and supply chain, you may not have that same that historic experience on those. So the first thing it talks about, how to enable the AI-powered agents within the ecosystem, right? Where you can use, discover, and configure those different agents. Now, it talks about the prerequisites. I'll probably talk about this a lot more in the future because it's just not you activate it in the feature management. It is, you have to make sure that Dataverse is instance. You actually install the Copilot in Finance on the environment within the PPAP, right? The Copilot's got to be enabled under this. You have to have billing enabled. I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but this is important because there's separate billing for Copilots. A lot of these have been historically free. Knowing that if you start using and getting value out of some of these Copilots within the ERP system, we're going to start billing for those. And then you have to make sure that you have immersive homes turned on, right? And agent management feature is going to be turned on. So again, there's just not a simple toggle. There's a lot more on the prerequisites. On the nav options, it's like either the immersive home, there's going to be agents and agent activity that I just spoke about. Otherwise, you can reach those through the search bar, right, for the same type of things. And then there's two ways to discover, either the library, which is like, okay, these are the new ones. You browse the agent templates, you can preview those, and then select which ones you want to have deployment. Or on the managed side, it's like, what do we currently have, add or existing, activate, deactivate those. How to set it up, how to track agent activity that shows the interactions with the task completions and the data that's stored in the database for Dataverse entity. And that's retained for 90 days. And you can change that retention from the standard of 90 days to more or less, right? Now, let's see, billing and credits. This is something you'll want to pay attention to. So organizations are billed for each deployed agent, right? Except for the standard agents that we have out there. But if you exhaust the allocated credits, the agents may be temporarily deactivated. So that's an important to know. So you need to watch that. So people are using this like, why isn't this working? What happened to it? And everybody's like scrambling around. It's like, well, you ran out of credits and it doesn't work anymore. There's also limitations to this preview. So this is a preview. So there's no extensibility on this one. There's no direct admin override for individual user actions if you want to cancel those. So if you want to do something like that, you have to batch job that. So a little bit on that. And then it kind of talks about the batch job cancellation. So again, I wanted to spend a little bit of time on this because this is newish to the admins within the finance and supply chain. But that's the content we have, and I can't believe, well, this is probably the longest show we've had in a very, very long time, Bart. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, but that's okay.
a lot going on with this new agentic revolution.
Yep. As always.
Everywhere.
Yep, as always, look for your updates. Make sure they're up there, and there's 4 places you can find out more detail for those updates as you go through. So, with that, Bart, that's the end of the show.
Let's call it a wrap, and we'll see everyone in a fortnight.
See you in 2 weeks, everybody. All righty.